Here at the Murder Sheet, we work hard to bring you newsworthy reports and interesting interviews. Sometimes, we get into the habit of working so hard that we start dealing with burnout. We push off fun activities while focusing exclusively on work.
Nowadays, when we find ourselves dealing with that pressure, we try to remind ourselves that we've earned some fun. Then we pull out our phones to play Best Fiends, the fiendishly delightful mobile puzzle game that we are both obsessed with.
The free-to-download game sees a fellowship of brave bugs battling it out with invading slugs. It's a puzzle game.
It's fun to make matches that set off rockets and other pyrotechnics, racking up bigger and bigger moves until you defeat a level for good. It's a fully customizable game, allowing you to pick your own favorite fiends to take on the slugs.
Plus, you get to explore new levels, new challenges, and new worlds all the time. So you're always encountering something fun and novel as you play.
I'm on level 262.
I'm crushing Kevin, as usual. I'm on level 995.
So that's what you were doing while I was editing the show.
You've earned your fun time. Go to the App Store or Google Play to download Best Fiends for free. Plus, earn even more with $5 worth of in-game rewards when you reach level 5. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. James Redline was 18 when he learned his father's secret. He and some friends were in the basement of his family's Allentown, Pennsylvania home, digging through old photo albums sometime back in the 80s.
And these articles fell from behind some photos. And my friend found it. And he's like, oh my God, look at it.
Jay stared at the headlines.
Allentown gunman shot in Reading police clash. James Redline faces murder count today. Redline has one of state's ace lawyers. Redline found guilty of first-degree murder. Redline sentence, life for murder.
I was floored. I had to look at it over and over again.
None of this made sense to Jay. He had grown up around law enforcement. His dad was friends with practically every cop and firefighter in town.
And my dad got home that night. He almost looked terrified when I found out about what he had been involved in. I mean, I kind of sprung it on him. And I don't think he was happy about that, especially with my friends being there. We all sat around like we're about to hear a ghost story, and we're in front of a campfire in the woods.
My name is Áine Cain.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee.
And this is The Murder Sheet, a weekly true crime podcast.
Áine and I connected over the Burger Chef murders, a 1978 unsolved case involving the killings of 4 young restaurant employees.
Now we're looking to track restaurant homicides. To help us understand the patterns of these crimes, we created a spreadsheet of nearly 1,000 eatery-related killings, the Murder Sheet. We'll be drawing on that data throughout Season 1 to give you a deep dive into undercovered crimes.
We don't just rely on skimming the headlines. We dive into these cases to bring you in-depth coverage.
Today, we'll be talking about a different kind of crime story on the Murder Sheet. On its surface, this episode has all the ingredients that you're probably used to by now. A restaurant, a homicide, and a police investigation. But as we dug into this story, we realized that it was quite unusual in several respects. This is a story about violence and death, but it's also about change, community, and rehabilitation. It's a story about murder and redemption and love.
We're the Murder Sheet, and this is Finding James Redline.
The two strangers had a hankering for free and loose women. That's what they told Raymond R. Hirschman, the clerk at the Hand in Hand Cafe. Such requests weren't unheard of on the seedier side of Reading, Pennsylvania. Hirschman and Calvin Summers, the restaurant's handyman, knew exactly where to take their two customers.
So the four men set off into the cold April night, moving along the railroad line, off to the Midway. The Midway Cafe, or Midway Restaurant as it was sometimes called, didn't just have hot meals on the menu. It was also a front for a brothel managed by House Madam Mabel Jones.
When the group arrived a little after midnight, Hirschman slipped away to relieve himself in the restroom and left his new friends to get better acquainted with the girls on staff.
He couldn't have imagined what he'd find when he emerged from the bathroom.
One of the sex workers approached him, trembling, tears in her eyes. She told Hirschman that the two strangers he'd brought in were robbing the place. The two strangers, dangerous men named Erber Warsek and James Redline, had drawn guns and rounded up the sex workers and their clients. They were shaking them down for money and jewelry and watches and muttering about the smallness of the take.
They wanted to get into the valuables that were stashed away in the Midway safe. But only Mabel had the key, and she wasn't there. The robbers started to get nasty, pistol whipping their hostages and making threats.
One of the sex workers spoke up, revealing that she knew exactly where Mabel was. The woman with the key to the safe was only a few blocks away, at the bar of the Grand Hotel.
Warsek and Redline decided to go get her. The only question was how to manage it. They decided that Warsek would head over to the bar to fetch Mabel, taking one of the hostages from the Midway with him. Redline would stay at the Midway, holding everyone there at gunpoint until Mabel returned.
Before Warsek left with his hostage, a young woman who said her name was Ardella Smith, Redline called her aside and asked if she liked her face. She said she did. He told her if she didn't follow instructions, she wouldn't have a face anymore.
Warsek then pulled her outdoors and pressed the barrel of his gun in her side. "Walk like a movie star," he said. "Don't act suspicious and you won't get hurt." He took a breath and then added one more detail. "I've already killed one person," he told her, "and I wouldn't mind killing another." And then the pair set off in the darkness for the Grand Hotel.
We wanted to see where this happened, so we drove to Reading, Pennsylvania to check it out. Our first stop was a parking lot that used to be the site of the Midway restaurant. The building that housed the diner/brothel is gone. Now just a place to leave your car while you visit a manufacturer of optical materials.
The railroad station is still across the street, but the train stopped coming long ago. A couple of years ago, a company converted it into a brew pub. Even from the Midway site, we could hear the sounds of the music the pub played to entertain its well-dressed patrons.
We decided to follow the path Ardella and Warsek took that night. We walked along the old railroad tracks, heading for the building once known as the Grand Hotel. The area across from the brew pub was full of decaying residential buildings. It must have been seedy even back in 1956, on the night of the robbery. It was a short walk, a straight shot that took us no more than 2 minutes, but it must have seemed much longer to Ardella. We could imagine the terror and isolation she must have felt, walking in the night next to the railroad tracks with a man she knew was willing to kill her.
The building that used to be the Grand Hotel still stands, but no one would call it grand anymore. If you look the place up on Google Maps, you will see a gaunt, bearded, and shirtless man staring out of a second-floor window. He was also there when we arrived, as if he had not moved even an inch since Google had captured his image. The building he calls home looked run down, dirty, and badly in need of repair. We could not help but wonder if it appeared different back in 1956.
On that April night, blissfully unaware of what was occurring back at her establishment, Mabel sat relaxing at the hotel bar with a couple of her friends when she noticed Ardella come in with a stranger. That was not necessarily unusual. Mabel's brothel was right by a busy railroad track. She conducted a lot of business with strangers. But Ardella seemed scared.
The man kept his distance as Ardella approached Mabel. It was very important, said Ardella, that Mabel come and talk with the man right away. So Mabel rose and walked with Ardella over to where the man stood.
Her friends at the bar watched from a distance. In the noisy din, they couldn't hear what was being said, but they could read Mabel's body language. She seemed uncomfortable, agitated. Something was wrong, something serious.
She walked back to her friends, told them she had to go. Glancing over her shoulder, she noticed that the stranger and Ardella had gone outside to wait for her. That meant she could risk telling her companions just a little bit more.
There was a holdup in progress at the Midway, she said. They should get the police. And then she went outside to meet Ardella and head back to her restaurant with Warsek.
Mabel's friends stared at each other for a moment in shock, and then raced outside in time to see Warsek head off with his 2 hostages.
The friends spotted a pair of cops on the street. What a stroke of luck. They let the officers, John Kowalski and Michael Parate, know what was going on, and the 2 patrolmen set off after Warsek.
Maybe if they knew then who he was, they would have been a little more careful. A decade earlier, the police chief in a squad car full of officers showed up at Warsek's Allentown, Pennsylvania house with a reporter in tow to ask Warsek a few pressing questions about a crime spree. Warsek managed to get the jump on them and pull a gun, driving off with the chief as a hostage. That chief, Wayne Elliott, eventually managed to escape, and Warsek got sentenced to a stretch in prison for the whole debacle. He got released early, though, because he convinced the parole board he'd learned his lesson.
Unfortunately, the lesson he learned was that taking police officers prisoner was a good way to buy some time when he was in a jam. Warsek heard the steps of the patrolmen behind him, heard the sound of their feet crunching on the rocks by the railroad tracks. He could tell they were getting closer. He knew what to do.
He spun around and pointed his weapon at the 2 dumbfounded police officers. Mabel and Ardella immediately fled. Warsek had 2 new hostages, but what should he do with them?
Mabel's friends saw Warsek disarm and lead away the 2 officers, so they immediately notified more police. Cop cars started speeding towards the Midway. The clock was ticking for Warsek and Redline and their jumble of hostages.
Warsek marched Kowalski and Parate back to the Midway, forced them upstairs, and locked them in a back room. In his bid to capture the police officers, he let Mabel slip away. The robbers' only shot at opening the safe was gone. It was time for him and Redline to get out of there with what little loot they'd been able to pick off the sex workers and their clients.
But it was already too late. Squad cars had surrounded the Midway. The police lights flashed upon Hirschman and Summers and the other hostages, who Redline was still holding at gunpoint in the restaurant portion of the building. There was nowhere to run. Still, Redline made a go of it. He burst out of the restaurant, yelling, "You would call the cops," to no one in particular. Then he made eye contact with one of the officers. "The man you want is in there," he said, gesturing back at the Midway.
Apparently, he didn't get the response he was looking for. Redline raised his .45 caliber revolver, carefully aimed it at the officer who was about 20 feet away, and fired. He took off running. The gathered police officers fired back, hitting Redline. Clutching his bleeding stomach, he crawled under a car that was parked across the street.
Next, It was Warsek's turn to step out of the restaurant. The thief and kidnapper, who'd once convinced a parole board to be lenient, was out of tricks to play. He tried to shoot his way out. The police opened fire until Warsek fell down dead on the steps of the Midway. With one of the robbers dead, it didn't take long for a state trooper to drag Redline out from under the car.
State police officer put his foot on my dad's throat, put a shotgun down to him. My dad believed he was going to shoot him, but a couple other officers ran up. He said, but he wasn't even mad at the cop at that point. My dad was so remorseful for what he had done that I think he was good with whatever played out at that moment.
Lying handcuffed to his hospital bed, Redline got some bad news that had nothing to do with the police slug that had gone into his belly. Prosecutors were charging him with not just robbery and kidnapping, but felony murder as well.
In his haze of painkillers, Redline must have felt puzzled. The shot he took at the cop had missed. Not only did he not kill the officer, but that bullet hadn't even scratched him. But he had a surprise coming. Redline, who sheltered under a car as Warsek was shot to death by the police, had been charged with the felony murder of his partner.
The idea behind the felony murder rule is that felonies are so inherently dangerous that anyone who agrees to participate in one should be held fully responsible for any deaths that occur during the felony, even if someone else actually pulled the trigger. In this case, that meant that even though the police had shot Warsek to death, prosecutors would hold Redline responsible due to the fact that he and Warsek were in the middle of a felony when the death occurred. A jury ended up buying the argument. Redline was convicted of felony murder and sentenced to life in prison.
But that wasn't the end of his story. For some reason, Redline got help. Top-flight legal talent started working on his behalf. Maybe that was because the lawyers just wanted to work on an interesting case, or maybe it was something else. When Redline was arrested, they found 57 packets of heroin in the car he and Warsek had shared. Some wondered if this meant the gunmen had been involved with interests larger than themselves, interests that were now bankrolling the best possible defense for Redline.
In any case, his attorneys took his case all the way to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they won.
The court ruled that it was justifiable homicide for the police officer to take a shot at the rampaging Warsek, and Redline could not be held criminally liable for a legally justifiable act. His conviction got tossed out.
Redline still needed to serve time on other convictions, most of them involving a string of violent robberies in the nearby town of Pottsville. But he became a model prisoner, even giving police information that helped them bust up a major drug ring.
When he finally got out, he met a woman, married her, and had a son named Jay. And he did not talk about his past at all until the day the newspaper articles fell out of the scrapbook.
To go through life with all of his friends and my mother's friends without ever hearing a word about this, and then all of a sudden all this information's dropped on you at once that depicts that your father was involved in, something that's horrific. It was shocking. It was almost a little scary. We were like, oh my God, maybe he's angry. My buddies were a little bit paranoid about what his reaction would be. But then I think he was more embarrassed than angry. I think he was upset with the fact that I finally knew. I think maybe he was waiting for the right time to tell me himself, which, he had pride, and I think it hurt his pride at that point that I had found out it was a tough day for him to face me and my stupid decision to have my friends there at the time, and spring this on him. I think it was a very tough day for him to confess to that.
Redline tried to explain what had happened forthrightly. And he wanted to leave a message that Jay would never forget.
He shot me a look and explained immediately, I did my time. I was wrong with what I did. And he did even throw in at the end of that conversation, I remember this, he goes, please understand that I will never do anything to hurt you or someone else.
Let's take a quick break from the murder sheet to tell you about a podcast investigating yet another unforgettable crime. The Orange Tree is a 7-part series about a 2005 homicide that happened near the University of Texas at Austin. The murder of 21-year-old Jennifer Cave, who was shot, dismembered, and left in a bathtub at her friend Colton Petoniak's apartment, continues to haunt the area to this day.
Like the Burger Chef murders, this case features plenty of twists and turns, including Colton's flight to Mexico with another UT student, Laura Hall. Both were later convicted in connection with the crime, although Colton has continued to appeal his verdict and claim innocence. The business student turned convicted murderer now says that he doesn't even remember much about the night Jennifer died.
The Orange Tree is reported on and produced by Haley Butler and Tue Thomas, who were both seniors at the University of Texas when they started this project. Together, Haley and Tue strive to piece together this tragic story in an in-depth podcast that features audio from courtroom scenes and interrogation rooms, prison phone calls, and exclusive interviews with both the perpetrators and the victim's family. You can binge all 7 episodes of The Orange Tree today on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
We strive to inform the public with our reporting, but running a podcast can be a stressful enterprise. There's lots of sitting hunched over a computer, getting frustrated over uncooperative editing software.
So that's why we are thrilled with our sponsor Tenassi, a company that makes a range of products from a special and potent CBD plus CBDA formula. Kevin and I have made their lotions, salves, and tinctures a key part of our daily rituals. We feel they keep us calm and reduce our aches and pains. We hadn't tried out many CBD products in the past, but we found that Tenassi's pure and potent formulas really work for us.
The most popular Tenassi products are the soft gels. Customers often take these right before bedtime to allow for better sleep and recovery. You can read feedback from other customers on Tenassi's website, talking about how these products have changed their lives.
We also love that Tenassi is supportive of scientific progress. A total of 5% of all its revenue goes back to university researchers, so they can keep looking into the CBD plus CBDA formula.
Go to Tenassi.com and use code MSHEET to get 50% off at checkout. That's TANASI.com to get 50% off for your first order with promo code MSHEET. Statements regarding efficacy and safety have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure any disease. There is nothing like listening to a true crime podcast late at night and then rushing to make sure all your doors and windows are locked. We've definitely been there.
But these days, we feel much less worried about our safety thanks to our Simply Safe home security system.
And the nice thing about Simply Safe is that they're flexible and affordable without compromising their service. At Simply Safe, your safety is the number one concern. But they're offering top-notch services for an affordable price. And our listeners will get a special deal on 40% off their advanced security system. Back when we lived in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, we could have really used this Simply Safe system. It doesn't require any drilling, so it's perfect for renters.
Today, we love being able to check into our system via an app on our phones. It's great to be able to monitor our crystal clear HD live streams of our security cameras. It makes us feel like we're taking charge of our own safety.
Don't miss this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/msheet today. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplysafe.com/msheet. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
And now, back to the murder sheet.
Do you know what I just retired from doing for a living?
Do you manage a rock band?
Well, that's my side gig. Now it's my full-time gig, but I just served as a police lieutenant for over 20 years. So I'm like, I wonder if they know I was a cop. And
We did not know
after
that.
what my dad went through.
While researching the Midway case, we tracked Jay down on the web. But in all our research and internet stalking, we'd failed to realize that the son of the man convicted for war sex killing was himself a recently retired homicide detective.
Yeah, I just retired as a lieutenant over the homicide unit out here in the Phoenix area, and I was a cop in Pennsylvania for a little while, and then I moved out here and became a cop out here and climbed through the ranks, did over 6 years on the SWAT team, worked 5 years in a pseudo undercover team, and ended up being a lieutenant my last 6 years.
Jay was a cop, and his father's long-ago crime was his first ever mystery.
After the confrontation, Redline did not talk much about the shooting.
He never mentioned jail time or what it was like in prison, other than telling us initially what happened with the whole incident. He very ever rarely talked about it. In fact, I learned more by signing up for this newspapers.com thing and looking at some old articles and learning about it.
But Jay still tried to piece together everything he could find about his dad's background, from his coal country roots to his foster home upbringing. Jay became less interested in what happened at the Midway in April of 1956. He really wanted to know what brought his dad to that point, pistol whipping hostages and riding around with a trunk full of heroin.
He kind of fought to be able to make a dime here and there as a young kid and kind of fell into some trouble. And in the area that he grew up in, the way he explained, you had to be tough. You had to know how to fight. You had to know how to make a dollar. You had to find odd jobs or maybe get wrapped up into, some type of petty crime to make money, to be able to have shoes on your feet and to feed yourself. He got wrapped up with the wrong people, thinking that it was the right way. He was tough. I ain't gonna lie. He carried himself as a tough man. Not scary, but you just kind of knew not to mess with him if you're another adult or whatnot. He never backed down from anybody that I had seen. He always wanted to be good.
And Jay feels what happened after his dad got out of prison proves that.
His dad got a good job as a garment cutter and worked hard to provide nice things for his family, like a cabin up on Lake Wallenpaupack. He knew how to have a good time. As he grew up, Jay sometimes felt his own friends would rather hang out with his dad.
And, perhaps most importantly, Redline raised his son not to repeat his mistakes.
He instilled in me, ever since I was a little kid, that, you respect your elders, you respect women, you respect police. And with his friends being cops, and I mean a lot of cops. I mean, he knew like every cop, and they were always at the house and always there for holidays and vacations and everything. And it just kind of, the way he carried himself, there didn't have to be a lot of words to say, okay, this is the police, you respect them. It was his mantra, and I fell in line because of his actions more than his words.
He also became a beloved employee at Allentown's Police Academy and a long-standing volunteer firefighter.
But Redline didn't manage this turnaround all on his own. He got help, not just from friends, but from law enforcement officials, like the roller skating parole officer, who'd keep his visits discreet and quick.
Looking back and figuring out, there was this guy that roller skated past our house like once a week, once a month. He'd roller skate all over the city. Turns out he was probation or parole officer for my father. And he'd come up to the front porch, check on my dad while I was there. Everything was cryptic. so I didn't know even as a kid.
He also got support from Jay's mom, with whom he fell in love after being released.
Their relationship, they complemented each other on how they both lived their life.
With all this assistance, Jay believes his father got a chance to become the sort of man he was always meant to be.
But some of Redline's underworld friends may have stuck by him, even after he started to go clean. Jay always wondered how his father came about such quality legal representation.
My dad just had these weird connections, and I always wondered, like, if the whole mafia thing existed in my dad's world and he was connected enough where there was some relationship, higher up people that had helped him have a decent defense. I remember, all the mayors of Allentown, our house, all these dignitaries that my dad hung around. It was quite interesting how he those relationships and kept them.
But Redline also became friends with many local cops and instilled a respect for law enforcement in his son. Jay's feelings for police went beyond respect, though. He dressed as a police officer for Halloween and consistently embraced the role of law enforcement during games of cops and robbers. Jay felt being a police officer was a calling.
Later, when he became a cop, Jay would keep his father in mind when dealing with criminals, realizing that everyone deserves respect and that anyone could potentially improve and become better if offered support and kindness at the right time.
To this day, I'll run into a gang member that maybe had done 10 years in prison that got out. Maybe I even put them there. And they're able to walk up and shake my hand and talk to me because I know the name of their mother or their sister or their brother. And I can ask, hey, do you still live down on Yuma Street? How's your mom doing? And that's a relationship I tried to foster as a police officer to gain respect of the community and give respect to the community. Trust me, it makes your job so much easier as a cop when you don't talk down to people and you go to work and you can walk into that neighborhood and you don't necessarily have to have your head on a swivel or worry about people throwing rocks at your head because you treated them with respect. Even though you may have taken them to jail, you treated them with respect when you did so. And that's how I played my whole career out, and it absolutely worked for me. People are going to make mistakes. You still respect them. You talk nice.
Jay's friends on the force weren't the only ones to love and respect his father. Redline got affection and help from a wide variety of sources. Some of the strongest support the Redlines received came from a place no one would have expected, from the members of a popular rock and roll group.
My best friend's lead singer, Fuel, who I started hanging around, and I'd go see a concert. They were becoming famous. And Kevin was nice enough, and so was Brett, lead singer, to, hey, we'll keep an eye on your dad for you. So they'd bring him to concerts and bring him backstage.
Redline strove to be worthy of this support and to be as helpful to others as they were to him, becoming the type of friend you could call when you needed a hand with painting or anything else. But no one meant as much to Redline as his own family.
We wanted to see the place that meant so much to Jay and his father. One afternoon in September, we drove to Waltz Point on Lake Wallenpaupack. It was the dying edge of the season, but you could easily imagine the place packed with families and young people, soaking in the summer on a blistering day in June or July. Even in the early autumn, there were people on their boats, laughing and drinking and enjoying the calm waters underneath the lovely large sky. They appeared more working class than wealthy, and they seemed a tight-knit bunch too, as if this was a special place where the same families kept coming back year after year. They certainly looked a bit alarmed at our intrusion, but then again we were walking around stealthily attempting to record the tiny waves, so that's not too surprising. After a while, we hiked to the isolated spot where Jay and his family would swim during the summer. It was quiet and still. A man and his dog played on the other side of the bend in the lake, and a boat sputtered far off the shore. Large gray rocks stacked on top of each other littered the area. The surrounding woods were dense and drenched in moss and caterpillar silk. As we trekked along the trail, we heard deer crashing through the brush here and there. It was lovely, the sort of remote, peaceful place you could come to both enjoy others' company or simply to unwind in a beautiful, natural setting. We could understand why this area meant so much to Jay and his father.
We used to go walleye fishing on Lake Walnut every weekend. And all the boats would go out together at night, fish late in the night. All the guys would be talking on the CB. And I remember being mad at my dad. I was probably like 10 or 12. And I caught this massive fish. And I'm talking, I do a lot of fishing. This thing had to be like 40, 50 pounds. And that's monster for Lake Walnut. And we're getting up the side of the boat. My dad went to put it in the net, and he bumped it off of the hook, and it disappeared. I was so pissed, and I cried all the way back on the boat ride. And you know, he would bring that up constantly. Remember that time I bumped that fish off on you?
Jay also remembers how much his mother meant to his father.
But he and my mom got along great. I think my dad was heartbroken when she had passed away. I had a dog named Sugar at that point. And my dad was used to driving up to the cabin with my mom every Friday. Well, that dog got to sit in the front seat now, and he was inseparable with the dog. I think the dog helped save his life after my mom passed away because he just needed that companionship. And although it's a dog, it's not going to talk to you, obviously. I think it helped him get through my mom passing. But they had a good relationship, and he was very good to her.
Then the day came when Jay decided it was time to leave home.
I felt heartbroken that I was leaving him.
But Jay knew that his dad wouldn't be alone. And it wouldn't just be his police buddies checking in every day.
My boys from Fuel, great band. They were famous at the time, but they always took time to take care of my father. It was crazy.
In fact, it was Jay's friend, Fuel drummer Kevin Miller, who gave him the heads up that his father had been hospitalized. Jay was on the other side of the country, attending SWAT school in Arizona. Jay called Redline, telling his father that he would immediately return home to be with him during his illness.
I said, hey, I'm going to leave SWAT school and fly back today. And he goes, no. He goes, what do you got? I go, I got 1 week left. He goes, you finish that damn school. I'm going to stay alive. Don't worry. You'll have time to see me.
Jay graduated the course and returned to Pennsylvania. He stayed with his dad until the end.
The day before he passed away, he was laying in bed. He was bedridden. He was still a tough dude. He looked at me and he goes, hey, I hate that you have to be here taking care of me, in this way. He goes, I will die today, but my heart's too strong. I can't die. He goes, my heart won't quit. And it was shocking to hear a man on his deathbed talk that tough to where he was like, I'm okay with dying, but my heart's just too strong. It won't stop.
Jay was holding his dad's hand when he died the following day. Jay also thinks about the night when he was about 8. The family was out at the cabin on the lake. His dad awoke him at 1 a.m.
We drove down to this overlook area, and I got to see this lunar eclipse, and that always stuck for some reason in my head.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Murder Sheet. Special thanks to Kevin Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
To keep up with the latest on The Murder Sheet, please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Murder Sheet, and on Facebook at MSheet Podcast or by searching Murder Sheet. For exclusive content like bonus episodes and case files, become a patron of The Murder Sheet on Patreon at patreon.com/murdersheet. If you enjoyed listening to The Murder Sheet, please leave us a 5-star review to help us gain more exposure. And send tips, suggestions, and feedback to murdersheet@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening.